This is Gemara Metziah, Daf Kof Vav, and we're holding at the bottom of Kof Hey Amid Beis at the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Makabel Sada Mechaveroi. Again, a similar case like we've been discussing the last few daf. Someone is Mekabel, Kablanos leases a field from his friend, and the field gets destroyed. And locust ate up the field or is blasted by wind. So now it depends. If this happened widespread, this is by everyone, then he could deduct from the rental. But if it's not a widespread calamity and it's more of a localized issue that happened with this field, then you cannot subtract. Says Rav Yehuda, if he leased the field for money, not that he's going to pay him with produce, then says Rav Yehuda, regardless whether it is a Makas Medina or not, irregardless of that, you cannot deduct from the rental. Says Rashi towards the end of the Amud over here, Benkach ubenkach, afilu hi Makas Medina, ein menacha. Why not? Shalam Mois like Nigzu Gezerah. There's no Gezerah on Mois. Therefore, must not have come to him. And now this really hones in on what the issue here is. Let's go up one more Rashi. And Rashi says, when we say that you cannot subtract, the reason is because we tell him it's your mazel. So we can understand now a little bit of what's going on in the Mishnah. If it's a widespread problem, then the renter says to the owner, listen, what do you want from me? There's nothing I can do. This happened to everyone. Whereas if it's a more localized, it only happened with this field, then it's seemingly your problem, and you would not be able to subtract from your rental. Says the Hiligi Gemara Echidami Makas Medina. What is the case of Makas Medina? What does it mean? What is the case of a Makas Medina? Amar Rav Yehuda Kegoin. For example, 3 lines at the bottom. De Ishta Veruba de Baga. The majority of the valley became wind blasted. It's not a localized problem, but it's a widespread problem. Ulamar, another example, Nishtadfu Arba Sadais Me Arba Ruchaisel. Not necessarily roiv of the whole bag of the whole valley, but 4 fields on 4 sides of this field were destroyed by the wind. Amar Ulam. Ba'u b'marav, they asked in Eretz Yisrael. Nishtav telem echad b'nei kula. Mai. What is the status if one row of produce along the whole field was wind blasted? 1 row, what's the halacha? Or nishtayru telem echad b'nei kula mahu. If sikobira, and a third shayla, if fields were separated, from the other fields, meaning there's lots of destruction, then there's some separation which were not, and then his was espasta. Let's say there's a field of espasta that separated the different types of field, as Rashi points out in the last line. That's the ingredient over here. That espasta is for animal fodder. Those fields which are windblown or not. So in all these cases, what is the halacha as we turn over to Kuvav Amid Aleph and another shayla? Zeracher mai. What happens if there's another type of crop that's separated between the wind blasted fields and this one? Do we say that it's wheat is similar to barley, kizera achar dami, and it's like another type of crop, oilai or not? Another shayla, kulam kula b'shidafain, shalai b'yirakoin. What if there was widespread calamity, but different type of widespread calamity? Everyone else's fields were destroyed by shidafain, this wind blast, and his field was slightly different. It was Yirakoin, was more of a yellowing. My inami kolam kulay, or the reverse was birakin. Shalai b'shidafa in my. So in all of these numerous cases in which there's at some level a makas medina, but at some level not. What's the halacha? Says the Gemara. Teku, for all of these shaylas, we're gonna have to wait for Eliyahu Hanavi b'siyata dishmaya. Amar le zarachiti vazalhi v'zaraziyah. 5 lines down, the landowner told the tenant to plant wheat, and he went and he planted barley, vishtatoif, rubadebago, and then there is a problem that it's wind blasted, a roif, vishavnani hanach sayri delay, and his barley is also. So my, mi amrin damarle ilu zarata chiti have Nami Mishtafa, that the renter could say, listen, it has nothing to do with me. It happened to everyone. Even if I would have planted wheat, it would have been destroyed. Or maybe the owner could say, if you would have done what I said, then it would have been fulfilled. It would have been fulfilled by me, that you will make a plan and will succeed. Meaning, maybe that there would have been a better sigula if you would have planted the appropriate thing. Says the Gemara, Mistaver Damar Leizar Tachita Makami Vitik Zaymer Ve'akam Lach Val Derachecha Nagar. That a Maisa that is a Gataina, and therefore the owner could demand to be reimbursed, even though this is seemingly, yes, a Makas Medina, but because the renter planted the wrong thing, the owner has a good taina, and therefore the renter would have to give the appropriate amount that he promised to give, whatever the crop was, even though it was destroyed. Continues the Gemara, another shayla. Nishtafu kolsa daisav shal machkir. What happens if all the fields of the owner were destroyed? Vishrav nami haba dayu, and this field was as well, but the majority of the valley was not destroyed. So, let's just understand this. Generally, we say, Mi Amrina and Kivin Lo, as you can understand, there's 2 different weighted areas. Since the majority of the valley was not destroyed, therefore, since the majority of the valley was not destroyed, therefore, we do not subtract, meaning it's not a Makas Medina. It's not a Makas Medina, and because it's not a Makas Medina, the renter has to pay like usual. Or do we say or no? Do we say that this clearly has something to do with the owner? All of the owner's fields were destroyed. Matzi Amrle. The renter could say, all your fields were destroyed, so it's clearly your problem, not mine. So how do we answer this shayla? Says the Gemara, the owner could say that if it was really my fault, a little bit would have been left over. Why? That Hashem makes it clear that it is a punishment, and therefore, says the owner, it's not necessarily my problem, and you have to pay me. And a similar shayla in the reverse. What about nishvu kol sadeisav shel choicher v'shadav ruba debaga? Mamish, the exact flip side. The majority of the fields of the valley were destroyed, which indicate Makas Medina, but all the fields of the renter were destroyed. V'shadav nami habadai. My me, I'm going to have ruba debaga and achila. You can subtract since it's a Makas Medina. Or do we say, since the majority of all the fields were destroyed, it's clearly your problem because your fields were destroyed? Says the Gemara, it's mistaver that he could say that it is your problem. Says the Gemara, but this is the exact opposite. If in the first case the owner could say, no, Hashem would have made it clear to me. So why in this case doesn't the renter have the same taina? Let the renter say, if it was my problem, there would have been a little bit left over. There would have been a little bit left over. Says the Gemara, no, a fundamental difference why you cannot say that. Because over here, Mishan Amar Lei, the owner Ketaini, Yavichazis the Lecha Midi. If there would have been something left over for you, and Mishtar Lecha Midinav Shach, would have been in your own field. For the fact that in your own field nothing was left over, therefore, it's clearly your problem. Says the Gemara, Meisvei. It was a year. It was a horrible year. Wind blast and yellowing. Or it's years like years of Eliyahu. There was a drought. They are not counting the years that for a stay achuzah. The halacha is that it does not count towards the 2 years that a seller has to wait in order to redeem his stei achuzah from a buyer. Says the Gemara, 7 lines from the white lines. But then it will count. Now we're not going to say Makkah's Medina. See, we're not going to blame it on a Makkah's Medina. So ask the Gemara, we should not say that a small area is going to be considered a Makkah's Medina as long as there's food elsewhere. I mean, the Gemara is asking that we learn to Ruba de Baga, the majority of the valley, or 4 others on 4 sides. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. It should have to be like the years of Eliyahu, which means there's mamish nothing anywhere. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Shiny Asam Damar Cross, says the pasuk V'Misra Shnei Tevuos Gimachar Lecha. There's a special pasuk when it comes to redeeming a stei achuzah, which we darshin Shana Yishish V'Hem Tvua Ba'olam. But it's not necessarily the same halacha. It's not necessarily the same halacha when it comes to the regular rules of Makas Medina. Says the Gemara, if this is true, then Shvita should be part of the counting. Why? Because it's not ba'olam. B'chutzaretz there's tvua. Amar le shviyah is the different rules. Avkata Damalki is considered that Hashem cancels it out. Amar le marzucha breder amari the ravina lemeata shviyah slotalam in agira. That if that is true, Shemitah should not count for the deduction when he redeems again the stei achuzah from the Beis Hamikdash. Alama Tanan, 5 lines into the white lines. Why have we learned? No, he says hello podin lishana, and we do deduct for Shemitah. Because at some level there is a usage that can be done in the field, even during Shemitah, that you could utilize the ground to dry peiros. Therefore, it's not that it was useless entirely. Says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel, 7 lines into the wide lines. The case of the Mishnah, in which we say there's a Makkah's Medina, and therefore the renter could subtract. Lo Shanu is only when what? Shezara v'tzamcha. He planted, it grew, and then v'achla chagov. Aval, however, lo zara klal loy damarli lo zara tav mekayim lo yavoshu beis rab meiravan yisba'u. If he didn't plant at all, then not. Mesav must have Rav Sheishes. As Rav Sheishes, Raya Raya Raya. A shepherd who was tending his flock, and he left it, and he came to the city, and a wolf comes, and it devoured one of the sheep, or a lion comes, we don't tell me, you see, so we evaluate, we would have been able to save name Alei, why can't he say, you have his husband would have been there, Makayim B, would have been fulfilled, the pasuk, we would have fulfilled the lion and the bear, your servant would have been able to destroy. So why don't we say the same thing, that your mere presence would have allowed the segula, would have allowed the pasuk to be fulfilled, like we're saying by us, when it comes to the field? Answers the Gemara, because that's a mamash. For you, it would have been fitting to fill an ace, Rav Chanani ben Dai said the Ma'asinan easy dubi v'karnayu, that the goats brought the beers on wolves on their horns, meaning if you can have an ace, you can have an ace. But wait, why does an owner say to the shepherd, need the Lenisa Rabbaloi have a chazino, Lenisa Zuta chazino? I don't understand. Just because you think all nisim are one size fit all? Maybe I'm Rai for a small nace, and not Rai for a big nace. Says the Gemara, that is indeed a good kasha. The Gemara concludes kasha. On the top line of Kovavim Abayis continues the Gemara, Tani Chada. We learned in Abraisa Pamri Shaina Ushniya Zara Shlishis Inay Zara. You have to plant once, you have to plant twice before you reduce from your payment. This is talking about a case in which there was Shidafain, there was Yirakain, but Shlishis Inay Zara. Tani Idach Shlishis Zara Vias Inay Zara. So which one is it? Says the famous machlokes, Rabbi and Rav Shimon Gamliel says the Gemara will be a play over here. How many times you have to plant a field? A machlokes, that's giving you the same machlokes, so they have to plant the field 2 times or 3 times. Amar Reish Lakish comes like Reish Lakish and he adds on like we saw, you have to actually plant. But if you didn't grow, then the owner could say all the days planting, you have to continue plant. Meaning it's only once it grew and then there was this issue that it counts. Says the Gemara Vad Emas, until the sharecropper is coming from the field, till they come back, and there's a certain one of the mazales over their head, meaning that's the time that the planting, the harvesting finishes. That's when you don't have to do it anymore. But until that time, says the Gemara, the chaycher, the renter, has continuously planted until there's a matziv that it grew, then it was destroyed. Meisvei asked the Gemara, Rashbag Mishum Rameir Aimer V'chen Rishimin Minasi Aimer Dvarav. Chati Tishrei Mar Cheshvan, Chati Tishrei Mar Cheshvan, Chati Kislev Zara, Chati Kislev Tevis, Chati Shevet Chayrif, Chati Shvat Adar V'Chati Nisan Kar, Chati Nisan Iyar V'Chati Sivan Katir, Chati Sivan Tammuz V'Chati Av Kayitz, Chati Av Elov Chati Tishrei Chaim. So says the Gemara, that's the Tanakama. It's Rav Yehuda Maina Mi Tishrei, Shema Maina Mi Mar Cheshvan. So now what's the kasha? Man make obekulu. What's the most lenient of all the shitas, of all the zmanim? Rav Shimon v'kuli ay loy kamar. It's Rav Shimon. Yeah, he didn't say that it goes all the way to when the mazel of kima is above your head, which is in the month of Adar. So says the Gemara, how do we fit the 2 braysos together? Explains the Gemara like kasha. Depends when you started the rental agreement. If the rental agreement started b'charfei at the time of the early crop, it's going to be different than if it started b'afli the time of the later crop. So the end of the Mishnah, Rav Yehuda said, if you accepted it with cash, then all rules are out. We don't deduct, even if it's a makas medina. Says the Gemara 3 lines to the white lines who covered the couple aram is lemizra behu. So a certain person who accepted a field to plant in it to me garlic. Akuda dinhar marka saba, along the banks of a malka saba, bezuzi, for money, meaning he rented the field that he's going to pay for cash. He's not going to give him, like we've been talking, a chaycher machir. He's not going to give him a crop as payment, but rather he's going to give him cash. What happened? Istakar nahar malka saba. The malka saba, this river became blocked up, and therefore he wasn't able to water the field. On the first white line, and Amrlei, Nahar Malkas Sabaloy Avad the Miskar. It's not a normal thing to happen. Never Malkas Medina, Malkas Medina, he's on the Chale. Therefore, you can detract from that which you have to pay. Amrlei Rabban, the Rabban, Antan Arvidaim, Makabli Mena B'Mois, Beikach, Benkach, Enemenach, Loimech Chakure. How can you say that? What about Shitas of Yehuda that said if you accept it for cash, then you cannot deduct, even if it's a Malkas Medina? Amar loho, so spanded Rava, less the chashla the Rav Yehuda, that's Shitas Rav Yehuda, but we are not chayshesh for that shita. We continue with the Mishnah 4 lines down. Someone accepts a field from his friend for 10 kor of wheat per year. The laksa, and the crop was destroyed. Nice he could give from that crop, this destroyed crop, a yachita yafais. If there was a good crop, I'll buy from the shuk and give you inferior produce. Rather, you have to pay him from the better stuff that grew. Says the Gemara, there was a guy that got less pasta. He accepted a field to plant as pasta, but kure this sairi for a rental that he's going to pay with sairi, with barley. Of the pasta v'charsha v'zara sairi. It produced as pasta, which he plowed, and then he planted with barley. He didn't plant a second espasta crop. The second crop he planted was barley. V'lak on his sairi, and then the barley was destroyed. So now how do we view this? So again, it grew the espasta, but then it didn't grow the barley. So Shachar Rav Chaviva Misura Tebras L'Kamei Deravina Ki Agavna Mai. What's the halacha in this case? Ki Laksa Noisin Lemiteichadami. Do we say that the halacha is that if the crop was destroyed, you'll have to pay from that produce? So you could pay from the destroyed sairim. Ayalai? Or no, because over here originally grew a good crop of espasta. Amalei responded, Ravina, mi dami asam lavadara shlichusa damara. What's the shaykhs between the two cases? In the Mishnah, the land did not carry out what it was supposed to produce, and therefore you can pay with that. It did. It produced a espasta crop. Therefore, even though subsequently it produced barley, which was inferior, of course you have to pay with the espasta crop that originally was produced. One last story, who got for the couple of parts of Mechavri, he accepted an orchard from vineyard from his friend Basara Dani Chamra for 10 barrels of wine. Tekavu Chamra, the wine spoiled. You could pay for the spoiled stuff. From there, Avashi Midami Asam Lavdara, Shlichusa Avdara, Shlichusa originally grew what was necessary, and therefore you should have to pay back from that. Ravashi Binvi Dekadoim, Vasada Shlaksa Baimera. But says the Gemara, Ravashi is masking in the case of grapes that were infested with worms, or if it was a grain field where the crop was damaged, that's not considered producing, and rather than you would, yes, be able to pay back from the inferior stuff that grew. We'll pick it up, just like in the case of the Mishnah, pick it up for the next Mishnah, B'siyata Dishmaya.